Hey, welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast with me, Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist, and my trusty co host, Mick Berry. And we discuss everything related to REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, which is an approach to psychotherapy to help people with their emotional and behavioral problems, devised by Albert Ellis in the 1950s, and who has written over 80 books on the subject. The idea in REBT is that our emotions and behaviors don't come directly from situations, but rather they come from our thinking about situations, thinking in terms of demands, musts, shoulds, supposed tos, have tos, demands we put on ourselves, others, and situations. And we will illustrate how that works in this podcast. Uh, if you're uh, Whenever you're watching this, this has been recorded on election day. So we're going to discuss rational emotive behavior therapy and elections. And people easily disturb themselves about all kinds of things related to elections. And some of the musts and demands they have are my candidate must win, others must see it my way and vote my way, and anyone voting differently is stupid, and they must not be so stupid, and the candidates and politicians should be reasonable. My friends and relatives have to agree with me. I must know who's going to win. I must not be anxious about this, and everyone must vote. Now, these all make sense as preferences. It would be lovely if your candidate won, and if you weren't anxious about this, but there's no must, there's no should, there's nothing that has to be the way you would like them to be. Mick, did you want to add to that?
Well, just that when it comes to elections, I think that people have incredibly strong desires. And the stronger our desire is, the easier it is to turn it into a should or a must. Well, they're all the same thing: a should, a must, a have to. And so, in a topic such as elections, or an activity like elections or elections itself, people easily create demands. And I think one of the reasons this is such a hot topic is because there have been political situations in which the circumstances become a matter of life and death. Literally, they do become a matter of life and death. And the United States fought a war in which people died in order to change their political situation. So when the stakes are high, meaning when we have very intense desires that mean so much to us, it is incredibly easy to come up with a demand, to turn our desires into a demand. People often mistakenly think that if we turn our desires into a demand, that will benefit us. If I think my candidate must win, if I think let's say I'm running for office, and if I think I must win, people often mistakenly think that will aid them in achieving their goal, but it actually keeps us from achieving our goal because we become preoccupied with our anxiety and our irrational, which is the same thing as unrealistic thoughts, and we're not able to deal with the real world as well. Let's say I'm in Germany in 1933 when Hitler was appointed chancellor. Now we know now how sticky that situation is. But if I'm thinking, oh God, I cannot possibly deal with this, I'm not being adaptable to where, gee, unfortunately, the best thing might be for me to leave the country and save my life and the family I'm with. And many people did choose to do that. They didn't waste their time with, oh, this must not be happening.
Yeah. And in terms of people must see it my way, this is people apply this to elections, but it could be applied to lots of other things like music. People must like the kind of music I like. I like classical music. You shouldn't listen to that other garbage. Or people must be on a healthy diet. I know what a healthy diet is, and others should eat the way I eat. So there's many things in addition to candidates in elections that people apply these musts to and upset themselves about it. Yeah, Mick?
I would say not just many things, countless things that we apply musts to. Countless.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the solution, once you identify what your musts are, why you're getting anxious, depressed, or angry, the solution is to question, challenge, and contradict your musts and show yourself that there's no reason anything has to be the way you want them to be. You don't have to be perfect and never make mistakes. Others don't have to treat you well, and your life must be fair, easy, and hassle free. So identify your musts, question and challenge them, and show yourself that, as Mick said, your preferences, even very passionate preferences, make sense, but no reason it has to be your way. Yeah, Mick?
Well, I was going to say regarding passionate preferences, if we are not demanding to get what we want, then we may even be able to evaluate our preferences, our desires, and no matter how passionate my desire may be, if I am able to question whether or not it's good for me, then I might be able to make a good choice. I myself have had situations in which I was enthralled with a particular woman, and by being able to evaluate it and telling myself I don't have to have this, I was able to tell myself, well, no matter how much I may find myself attracted to this particular woman, it's actually in my best interest not to get involved with her because all indications are it could be very detrimental. So even if we are feeling very passionately about something, if we don't make a demand, we can then see whether or not this passion that we have is even good for us. Just because we have a passion about something, just because we want something, that doesn't mean it's necessarily good. And if we don't turn it into a demand, we can evaluate it and then let go of it more easily.
Yeah, very true. And uh, derivatives of must, for example, my candidate must win, are one is I can't stand it if my candidate doesn't win. It's awful, terrible, and horrible if my candidate doesn't win. And it's the end of the world. So one of the things we like to emphasize in questioning and challenging your must is that by seeing in theory that a must is false doesn't mean that you've automatically changed your deep philosophy. It's a matter of a lot of practice and questioning and challenging and contradicting your must, doing it again and again and again and again. Mick?
Well, I was going to say with this idea that it's the end of the world when we're talking about elections and politics, we do know that governments today have the capability to end the existence of humanities, and that's a very real situation. So, how do we get out of telling ourselves it's the end of the world when we know that with the wrong people in power and the wrong decisions, the world as we know it could actually end?
Yeah, well, well, the Earth will still be there,
No.
but your life may end with a nuclear war, for example. But you're not going to live forever. You have to die sometime, and it's very sad, extremely unfortunate, and bad, and you might even say evil if that happens. But there's no reason it must not. Reality is reality, not the way you think it should be. Mick?
Yeah, and I was going to say, however devastating we might find, well, however devastating that outcome would be, it still is in our best interest to remember, unfortunately, there is no guarantee that that won't happen. And if we remember that, then the best way to avoid an accident is to be aware that it can happen. And if we're aware of that, we may, as Albert Ellis would say, get off our ass and do everything we can to prevent it.
Yeah, and that's a good point about no guarantee. There's no guarantee that anything you want has to happen, whether it's a political candidate or anything else. There are no guarantees. There are just high probabilities. So don't go to the other extreme and say, well, because there's no guarantee, I might as well give up. There's still, in many, many cases, innumerable cases, there are high probabilities you can get what you want by working hard at it. Nick?
And I was going to say that since there is no guarantee, I think that can be a very strong, as I was saying before, a very strong motivating factor to do everything you can to try to get what you want.
Right, right, exactly.
And what I said before, if you have the realistic perspective to possibly give up a passion, you also have the realistic perspective that if you have a passion and you don't tell yourself you have to have this, you can evaluate, well, is this a good thing for me to have? Then you could see, hey, this actually is a good thing for me to have and can be even more fun to pursue it.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of pursuing things, you can use the experimental method, which says set a hypothesis. I think it's a good idea for me to have X, Y, or Z, and then try for it and see if you achieve it, if it is a good idea, and also decide how much time and effort you want to put into achieving it. And once you've done that, then I think you've done as much as you can to achieve your goals. Mick, did you have a last word?
Well, I wanted to say that I remember talking with somebody about REBT one time, and he said, well, we are all scientists, and this is something that every human being experiences every day. How do I open a door? I turn the doorknob and I'm able to pull the door and open the door. This is a scientific experiment that I have reached a conclusion on. That's how I open the door. If for some reason I turn the doorknob and it doesn't open, well, then I can conclude the door is locked or maybe it's broken. But all of our activity day to day throughout the day is based upon ideas that we have and outcomes that will happen by certain things that we do. So a scientific approach of knowing that certain things work and certain things don't allows us to live in the real world and do things that we can do in order to achieve our goals. So REBT is simply helping people deal with the details of how to live in the real world to achieve your goals and happiness.
Yeah. And the first step there is to decide on what your goals are. And we've had podcasts on helping you come up with goals and work toward them. Okay, thank you very much, Mick, for your great participation here. Thanks, Chris Rossini, our tech engineer. Comment below if you have thoughts about any of this discussion or questions. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Suggest subjects that you'd like us to address and discuss. And volunteer if you'd like to get some free therapy. We'll cure you of any emotional or behavioral problem you have in about 30 minutes because we're very efficient. And subscribe to the 3-Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life.